And of course, the link to the recording will be made available to everyone from your faculty, professors in the classroom or via email or such if you wish to go back over it. Now, there'll be an opportunity at the end of the session for you to ask questions if you'd like. But right now you're on mute because we're going to be going through some slides, as always. And it's a little bit easier to do without interruption on the early part. So save your questions. There'll be plenty of opportunity at the end. I see we have a good turnout tonight. So that's great. And let me start by switching over and sharing my screen. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. And of course, there's our course overview, Data 610. Now, let me start, rather than just read the slides to you, that's not much fun. So let me start and give you a little, a very important perspective on things. You know, this is the data analytics arena, as all of you know, is available for a lot of jobs. I mean, we have like anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 million openings right now for people who are data scientists, data analysts, etc. So there's a wealth of opportunity. Now, there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is, of course, almost every organization going is now collecting data and wants to leverage that data. They want to make something out of that, gain some insights, figure out what they can sell next, who's likely to commit fraud, who's likely to churn and leave the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the attractiveness of it. However, there is a downside. The downside is you have to learn a lot about data analytics. Now, the good news there is that if you go back about a decade, and of course, I'm much older than all of you, I'm sure. If you go back to the time when this was hard to do, which wasn't that long ago, there wasn't really good software. There wasn't inexpensive and easy to use software. And so you basically had to do a lot of the machinations by hand. And so in the days, maybe a decade or so ago, data scientists would work very hard to build one model because they knew it was going to take so long to build one model or one analytics project that they had to work very hard at it because they had to do a lot of calculations either with calculators or by hand or with kludgy software. Now that's all gone. The tedious calculations are gone. Virtually every software package out there today does the calculations behind the scenes. So from that perspective, it's a little bit easier to become a data scientist. What's harder now is the ability to articulate what you've done. We now should be in the business of building many, many models, many, many excursions, many, many insights, and sorting all of that out and being able to explain that to the decision makers. By and large, the decision makers are not going to have an analytics background. So you're going to have to really hone your skills to be able to understand the techniques, the tools, what was done, what the caveats are, what the insights are, and articulate that well. So you will hear us mention over and over again throughout the program the ability to, quote, tell the story, unquote. You have to be able to do that. So I want to just say it's easy to click, click, click and get through the software, but do you really know what you did? Because if you don't, you're not going to succeed in today's modern world of the data scientist. So having said that as a perspective, let me go ahead and give you an outline of your very first course in the program. And for some of you, you may be coming from a background where you already have a data analytics perspective and background. Maybe you've been practicing for some time and you're looking to get the credential, the degree, if you will, that gives you a little bit more credibility. Others maybe are changing careers. Maybe your undergraduate degree was not in something that you now enjoy or that isn't paying you well enough or something and you wish to make a career change. Both are welcome. We have designed our program to suit both kinds of people, both kinds of perspectives in terms of a background. So it's very important that you keep up. It's very important that you put in the effort. As we've said before many times in our open houses and everywhere else, the people who don't succeed in our program are the people who don't find the time or put in the effort. So we have made the material palatable. We have found good readings. We have provided lots of tutorials, teaching assistants, excellent faculty, excellent readings, etc. You have to put in the time and the effort, and I'm sure you'll be successful. Now, having said that, let me go ahead and talk about this course. First, let me say a brief word about introductions. You know, the faculty like to look, we have multiple sections of 610, as most of you know. The faculty like to look and see the background of the people in the courses. You don't have to put in a bio, but it's nice if you do. We just like to know a little bit about people. Sometimes we can tailor certain parts of the course to suit certain needs and so forth. The second bullet is very important. You want to make sure that your email address is current and correct, because there will be correspondence via email on occasion, and the email address that's in the Leo classroom is the one we use. Third, if you have extra interests or things you're really interested in that we can cover in greater depth or whatever, post those. You know, sometimes people say, well, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, a little bit more about that. Believe me, we have lots of extra links, extra readings, extra videos we can provide to give you greater depth. So that's not a problem. Okay, so now let's drill down and talk a little bit more about the course. The focus of this first course is on decision making and analytics combined. Why that? Well, you know, the overarching purpose of analytics is to do what? Make better decisions. We want to try to help you help your organization or the organization you go to work for move ahead in what we call evidence-based decision making. Evidence-based decision making. For a long time, decision makers have relied on hunch, intuition, experience, and that worked great when there wasn't any data to override that or data to prove them wrong, etc. We now have data. We now should be making decisions based on evidence. And there are some links in that first week's lesson, some videos that have been recorded, that I recorded, to talk about some of the things that people fall into in terms of traps when they rely on hunch, intuition, and experience. We simply are not equipped to deal with the plethora, the abundance of data that's available now. We have a hyperabundance of data. So we focus this first course, we talk a little bit about decision making, you know, what's been done in the past and why evidence-based decision making has a lot behind it. And then we talk about how to do it, how to start making that change in your organization. So there are three major themes: frame a decision, analyze a decision, implement a decision, which includes telling the story. It includes selling the results. And you can read the words for yourself. Now, when we first started this program, we started in the spring of 2014, so we're in our 5th year. We used a book by Mr. Tom Davenport called Keeping Up with the Quants. And guess what his 3 themes were in the book? Framing a decision, analyzing a decision, implementing a decision. And as one of the designers of the program, I thought that was absolutely perfect. That is the way you should view almost every course. What can I do to help frame the proper decision? Because if you say, well, I've got a lot of data, I'm just going to wander in there and look around, you're not going to get anywhere. That will not work. Or if you say, I don't need to frame the decision, I'm just going to jump in there and build a model, that will not work. Once you frame the decision thoroughly, and you'll be doing that in the first few weeks of 610, you then do need to put some analysis against that decision. What does the evidence show? Should I go left? Should I go right? Can it point out the people who are likely to commit fraud or churn from the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But once you finish the analysis, and remember that could include doing multiple excursions, gaining multiple insights, you then have to be able to implement that. You know, there's the famous story of Netflix about 10 years ago who gave a $1 million prize to anybody that could improve their algorithm for recommending movies. And a lot of people entered, and one group won. But Netflix never implemented the solution because it was too complicated, too cumbersome, hard to understand. So there's a very important third piece, and that's implementing the decision. How do I make use of it? What do I do differently? Students still want to build models and say, here's the model, boss, what do you think? No. You have to articulate what should be done differently based on your model, based on your insights, based on your analysis, based on your visualizations. What should I do differently? And you've got to be able to articulate that clearly, concisely, in a way that's understandable by decision makers. This is also a competency-based course, as are all courses in the MSDA program. What do we mean by that? You will not be asked to critique articles. You will not be asked to write short papers. You will be asked to do competency-based projects. You will be asked to show us what you can do. Now, here's the key to that. We found that our Board of Visitors and our advisors told us, Steve and others, We want graduates who can do things, not who know things. Now you have to know things to do things, so they understood that. But we also want graduates who have a track record, if you will, of doing things. So we decided to make the entire program competency-based. Now, if you collect and save all of the projects, and we call them projects rather than assignments, if you save all the assignments or projects that you do throughout the program, you're going to have a very, very powerful resume built of things you have done. And that includes the capstone course, which I teach, where you do a very large project. It includes all of the data analysis you'll be doing in the big data course, in the predictive analytics course, all of the courses. So save all of your projects so that when you go for a job interview or promotion, you can say, let me show you what I've actually done, because these will be real projects. So that means you're graded on what you can do, not what you know. It also means that the assignments are fewer in number. You know, rather than having a fairly substantial assignment every week, there has to be some time in between these rather large projects to digest, to try things, to experiment, to learn new software. So we've spaced them out very well, and we think it works great. So the weeks between the assignments aren't weeks off. There are weeks for you to do other activities that will get you ready for the assignments, or the projects as we call them. You'll be learning new software. You'll be practicing with the software. So we've spaced everything out just right, we think, and it's worked out well for 5 years. Your instructors, of course, are the primary means for assisting you in the course. You have a primary faculty member, and you should know who that is for your section. You have a teaching assistant. Make sure you have the email addresses for both. The teaching assistant is primarily there to provide technical assistance on the software. The teaching assistant does not grade any of the assignments. That's all done by the primary faculty. But the teaching assistant helps the primary faculty because he or she, whoever the teaching assistant is an expert in the software. In fact, several of our teaching assistants are in fact graduates of our program. So they understand exactly what's going on with the software, and that's great. They turn out to be an extremely valuable resource. Make use of them. I'm sure every one of your courses will have a discussion area where you can post questions that are particularly suitable for the teaching assistant to answer. So take advantage of that. Now let's talk software. There's always a question of how much software you can learn in a 12-week course. We think you can learn 2 packages in this course, and I mean by learn, effectively master them to a degree. And we start you out with a package called Decisions First. Now, I would be very surprised if anyone out there had ever heard of this package before. It's a very small company. It's a very unique piece of software. It does one thing and one thing only, but it does it well, and that is it helps you frame a decision. It's not an analytical software per se. In other words, you can't build a regression model, you can't build a visualization, a decision tree, a dashboard with it. What you can do with Decisions First is frame the problem. Remember, that's step 1. And so we want to get you started thinking right away about framing decisions before you want to jump into the analytics software. So you'll have a few weeks early in the course where you'll be using Decisions First. You will be provided access to that from your faculty member, so they will tell you how to use that software. I will be doing a walkthrough of Decisions First Friday evening at 9 o'clock this week, but it'll be recorded because I know that may not be a convenient time for a lot of people. But there are also other walkthroughs. Mr. Taylor, James Taylor, is certainly a friend of mine to a degree, and he owns the company, and he does great tutorials and software, and I'll show you some of the links to that a little bit later. But what you really need to do is either watch or attend my walkthrough and view his walkthroughs, and that'll all become clear to you. About week 4, you'll be transitioning into your first analytics package. It's called Watson Analytics. It's from IBM. Now, we've been using Watson Analytics since its inception. It is ideal for your first package into the world of analytics. It's a package designed for end users, so it doesn't get too much into sophisticated techniques or mathematics or statistical probabilities and things like that. but it does do some interesting things. It does some fascinating things, and you'll see that when it unfolds at the proper time. You don't need to worry about that right now. But Watson Analytics is great. It will use the natural language processing that's built in to come up with some questions right away on your data set. When you load a data set, it'll say, well, here's some interesting questions. Of course, you can tweak those. It'll help you ask about things in the data set. It'll help you build some preliminary cursory models from the data set. It will help you build a dashboard and tell a story with a storyboard from the data set. So it does all of those things. And again, we'll be running that in the cloud. Your password and access will be provided at the appropriate time. So you'll be learning these two packages in this program. Everybody wants to know what the assignments are, so I've outlined them on this slide. Your first assignment will be due at the end of week, all of the assignments are due at the end of these weeks, by the way. At the end of week 3, you will turn in your first assignment, which will be an assignment using Decisions First software. At the end of week 5, you'll turn in your first assignment, which is data refinement, analysis, and cleaning using Watson Analytics. It does some of that. At the end of week 7, you'll build some very cursory but useful predictive models using Watson Analytics. By the end of week 9, your assignment will be to build some dashboards using Watson Analytics. And then we put you into teams of 3 or 4 and let you start over and use all the features of Watson Analytics in a team mode. We feel like it's important to learn to operate in teams. Remote teams are difficult to operate. It's nice when you can see everybody in a room, but more and more we operate remotely. In fact, I'll give you another aside. Just this week, it was announced that Zillow awarded their $1 million prize. Many of you know about Zillow. It's an outfit that keeps track of housing prices. They gave a $1 million prize to 3 individuals who teamed up. They never met each other before. They were not located anywhere near each other, but they teamed up and had the award-winning entry. They managed to reduce the uncertainty in Zillow estimates from 4.5% to 4%. They won the $1 million prize. They spent over 400 hours building various models, which sounds like a lot, but really isn't. But they built hundreds of models trying to find one model which would do the improvement needed to win the prize. You can find more of that online. Now, there's one other graded assignment, and that is a very small portion of your course grade is based on your discussion contributions. You know, each week we would like to see you participate in the discussion items for the week. Your faculty will provide you with some very, I think, interesting and intriguing questions. Many of them relate to perspectives like, what's your organization doing with analytics? Explain and tell us how. Tell us some success stories. Tell us some problems you've had. Tell us what you're doing and how you're using it. Those are some of the things that show up in the discussion. So be sure to put in some insightful things there. There are discussion items available for each week of the course related to the lesson. They add to the interactivity. You know, when we're doing these things online and we're doing them asynchronously, we fight hard to try to get some activity among and between the members of the class. So discussion items do a lot of that. They allow you to put your 2 cents in, supported hopefully by strong rationale, maybe references, etc. But if you want that credit to, achieve the credit for the discussion items, you've got to participate. We don't want everybody to just say, oh, I agree with the professor. I agree with the professor. I agree with the professor. No, we want your perspective. It's a good way for us to learn what's going on out in the real world. It's a good way for you to learn what's going on in various organizations among the members of your class. And you will see quite a difference. Some organizations are very advanced in their use of analytics. Some are toying with starting to use analytics, and they're a little bit behind. Some are in that middle ground. So, it's nice to know what's going on in the real world. So be sure to contribute interesting observations, questions, insight, experiences that are relevant, and contribute some depth to those. Don't just say, we use decision trees. Well, how, why, where, how successful have they been? Do they work? How much work are they? Do you have a special analytics team, or do end users do it? There's lots of depth and breadth you can add to that to improve your grade on the discussion items. There are a couple of ungraded requirements. That means you got to do them, but you don't get a grade. One of them is the Academic Integrity Pledge. In every course in the MSDA program, you are asked to sign digitally an Academic Integrity Pledge, which basically says that all of the work you do is yours and yours alone. You will post that or deposit that in the appropriate assignments area. You won't get credit for that, but I can assure you we have a rule that says you get no grade on any other assignment until you've done so. So basically you copy, go there, find the Academic Integrity Pledge, copy that, apply your digital signature, post it in the appropriate assignments area and be done with that. And do it early on so we don't have to wait to post grades for assignments. There is a second exercise that you get, well, you do get a little bit of credit for, a very small amount. We want you to do a Watson Analytics practice exercise in week 4. The folks at IBM used to have a 4-hour training course on Watson Analytics that you could take, and that basically got you up to speed real quick on Watson Analytics. That no longer exists. So fortunately, we have our own expert on the faculty. We have Yelena Batenskaya, who does the Watson Analytics walkthrough and has provided a short little Watson Analytics practice exercise, which has a few points graded on it. And you'll be doing that in week 4. Do not need to worry about that now. What else do you have to do? Well, each week there is a lesson plan or a lesson guidance or a lesson document, and in there are required readings each week. As most of you know by now, we eliminated all textbooks. We eliminated all textbooks about 1.5 years ago. So there are no textbooks. That saves you a considerable amount of money. We decided that there were free available readings, videos, etc. out there on the web and elsewhere that were just as good, if not better, than textbooks. And if the faculty curated those well, we could put together our own little list of appropriate readings for each assignment, and that's worked out very, very well. In addition, as I mentioned before, if you read something and say, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, I'm sure your faculty member will be able to provide you with additional extra readings. We know we're fighting for your time, but remember, we are expecting that you will give us 15 to 20 hours per week. 15 to 20 hours per week. If you do that, that will be enough time for you to do the readings, watch the required videos, do the assignments, practice the activities, whatever it is that needs to be done, and you will succeed. Start skimping on that, start trying to get by with only a few hours per week, you're going to fall behind, and that is the most dangerous thing that can happen in any of the courses. Now, your syllabus has some guidance. Your lesson guidance, of course, each week that shows up will have the detailed guidance. Sometimes those links break. Sometimes we find better links in reading. So be sure and check for updates, which are usually posted in the announcements section. You should actually attempt, and again, we're fighting for time, I know, we want you to be sure to look at that announcements section often. If you could just take a peek at it every day, that would be ideal. But certainly don't let it go more than a couple of days without checking to see if there's been some change to the assignment, to the readings, to the links, some update, such as posting, that we're having this session tonight, et cetera, et cetera. Be sure to check the announcements section frequently. Let me say a little bit about grading. I know it's of concern to everyone because that's how you make progress in the program, isn't it? Well, here's a quote from the graduate school policy. If you do on time, on task work, you get a grade between 80 and 85. That's a good solid B. So we've amplified that a little bit to try to expand on that. Assignments that meet the minimum requirements. That means you've addressed each of the tasks in the assignment adequately. You've submitted your assignment on time. You submitted it well written, meaning the flow is good. It makes sense. It's coherent. It doesn't have typos, misspelled words, improper punctuation or referencing. It has complete coverage of the task. If you do that, in other words, it's on time and it covers everything and it covers it well or adequately, that is a solid B. That is a solid B. That is not an A. You say, well, I thought I could get an A with that. No, that is what is expected. If you would like to increase your grade, not guaranteed, but if you'd like to look at ways to increase your grade, look for ways to add greater breadth or depth to your answers, to be more thorough in your addressing of the topic. I've already mentioned one aspect. You can do more in excursions. You know, you say, well, it says make sure you provide 3 insights that you found. Well, I'm going to provide 7. That's one way. Or when you get to a course in modeling where it says be sure to build at least 2 predictive models, maybe you build 5. Takes more time, takes more effort. It enhances your chances of getting a higher grade. Find and include alternate viewpoints. Be able to tell the story better. Be able to articulate your answers better. Be able to say not just the what, but the so what. You know, students are very good at the what. Here's what I did. They're not as good, in my opinion, as they should be in so what. Okay, so you did all this, so what? Does it mean anything? Is it going to change the way the organization operates? And if so, how? What are the caveats? What are the pros? What are the cons? So don't just add volume, but look for ways to make your answer more meaningful. It's what we call adding critical thinking, thought-provoking thinking to the projects. Of course, we strive to be as fair as possible in grading. All faculty do. A seminar B grade is good work. Remember, if you get all B's in the program, you will do what? Graduate in 2 years. If you feel there's something that was missed by your faculty, they certainly will invite any kind of pushback. So be sure to let them know if they overlook something. We do the best we can, but we sometimes could overlook something. I'm gonna remind you one more time that reading the assignments often is critical because any changes to things, readings, etc., shows up there first. So be sure to do that. There's also lots of areas in the discussion area, but there's one that's a special one. It's called Let Me Have Any Questions. If you have a question and you're pretty sure that the answer would benefit the entire class, this would be a good place to put that. Like, you know, what happened to the reading that was in the syllabus that doesn't show up anymore? Because that way, when that discussion item is responded to by the faculty member or the teaching assistant, everyone will see it. Remember, everyone can see what's in the discussion area. So we strive to respond to all of those questions as well as any other questions within 24 hours. Strive. Sometimes on the weekend it might take a little longer, but our goal is to respond to you one way, tell you what you can or can't do, or give you an answer or someone to talk to or whatever within 24 hours. If it's an emergency, of course, you can email or even call your faculty member. So how does this work? Well, remember it's asynchronous, so you get to do the work each week whenever it suits you best, time-wise. However, what will happen is the weekly lesson guidance, which has the material for the week, meaning the required readings, there may be required videos to view, there may be deliverables, there certainly will be discussion items. That will show up either Sunday evening or Monday morning at the beginning of each week, okay? What you should do, and also, also most weeks it has a recorded video presentation, usually by me, but that will be the lecture material for the week in video form that you can watch as many times as you like. Sometimes we'll have software walkthroughs included and so forth. There'll be lots of stuff in that. You want to look at that as early in the week as you can. Now, maybe you say, well, I was planning on doing my work Thursday, Friday, Saturday of the week. Fine. But look at it on Sunday or Monday and see what is to be done so you can plan accordingly. There might be some weeks where you think, oh, I know a little bit about that. I could probably get all that done in 1 day or 2 days. There might be other weeks where you say, uh-oh, I'm going to have to spend some time on this each and every day of the week to deal with it adequately. So the key is to at least look at that early in the week so you know what is expected. Don't wait, and if it's posted on Sunday night or Monday morning at the latest, don't wait till the following Saturday right before something is due to take a look at what you've got to do. We do understand that many of you do a lot of your work on the weekends. That's fine. But you need to know what is expected of you earlier in the week. So view the lesson material as early as possible. Put in the requisite time to make sure you address each and every assignment adequately, if not better than that. And ask questions at any time you're confused or something's not clear. Okay, so let me sort of finish up by saying, what are you going to do in the first couple of weeks? Well, I've already mentioned a couple things. You're going to be using Decision First. You're going to be using Decisions First software to do your first assignment, which is to fully frame a problem of your choosing. And I'll say a lot more about that when I do the walkthrough on Friday. And remember, that will be recorded, as is this, so you can see it at your own leisure. You can look ahead at the link that's on the chart here to listen to, watch, or view, or all, Mr. Taylor's very, very well done tutorial walkthrough. I'm going to do a microcosm of that with a different problem from a more or less a student's perspective, but his is excellent. In week 2, so week 1, you're basically going to get yourself signed up. You're going to take a look, going to look at the tutorials. You're going to start learning the software. In week 2, you really need to be able to log into your particular version of the software and use the tutorials and videos, become very familiar with it, start outlining what you're going to use for your decision to be framed, and maybe even begin framing it, because it's due, as you know now, at the end of week 3. And that is the end of my presentation there. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to open it up to questions. You can post your questions in the chat area if you have questions. We try to make sure, what we're trying to do in this first week is make sure you understand what's expected of you and tell you what we think you expect of us as faculty. But we do want to make sure that there aren't administrative hiccups, because you can't afford to fall behind. We want to make sure that there's not misunderstanding about where do you go to get the material or the links, or how do you get around the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that's got to be sorted out relatively early in the process, meaning week 1, early on week 1, like today or tomorrow. So if you're not familiar with your way around the classroom, go in there and make sure you can see the lesson guidance. Make sure you can look at the discussion items. Make sure you can look under course content, course resources, and see the things that are provided. Make sure you have a good understanding of what's expected of you, because it works a little differently, as you know, in an online environment than it does in the classroom. I can't see any blank looks out in the crowd when we're online, but if there are some, we need to have those people ask questions so we can clarify. So I'm going to stop right now. We're still recording. If there are questions, again, there's a chat. You should be able to scroll down to the bottom of your screen, click on chat, type your question in the chat window. If I can answer it, I will do so. If I can't, I'll get you an answer. So I'll just pause for a few minutes. Hopefully this has been clear, but if not, ask a question about anything you'd like in terms of administrative things, or again, the syllabus is where you want to start and look at the overall flow of everything. But again, the weekly lesson guides have the details. I'm delighted to see so many people here. You know, we've been doing this now. As I said, we started in the spring of 2014 with 15 students. We now have about 350. We have some terrific success stories, students who have won competitions, students who have won the Watson Global Analytics competition 2 years in a row, all volunteers. Okay. First question is an easy one, I think. How do you select groups for the final project? Your faculty member will do that. Some faculty, me, when I'm teaching 610, which I'm not this semester, but I do it with a randomly based on, that's one of the options within the software. Other faculty let you speak up and say if you'd like to be with Jane and John or something like that. So that's up to your faculty member. You'll have to ask him or her. Brianna, once you submit an item, is that the final submission? Will we ever get a chance to get feedback on an assignment if we're unclear prior to final submission? Well, certainly up until the due date, I have students who submit something early, maybe 3 or 4 days before the due date. Then they decide, oh, I can do better, and they submit it again. I always grade the latest submission. If you have questions on any of the assignments, you would ideally ask them before you submit your assignment, but work with your faculty member. He or she be glad to help clarify anything that is not clear. I think initially there's always a fog factor. You know, you're learning new software. I've learned hundreds of software packages. I understand that the first time you look at a new software package, you go, what in the world is this? But after you play with it, and that's the key, you've got to have some play time. In fact, a great book was written about 20 years ago called Serious Play, and it talked about the best way to learn software is to play with it. Watch your kids, and in my case, my grandkids, play with Fortnite or Minecraft and see how quickly they learn. And even the ones that can't read, for God's sake, they learn like by playing. Now, it takes time. But the key is to look at the tutorials, try things, and be sure you understand everything. So ask questions. Here's a question. Helpful introduction to course. According to the Watson link that was sent out, IBM Analytics, Watson Analytics no longer available for purchase. Yes. You have hit the nail right on the head, Adam. You're a little bit ahead of us in terms of our course structure. Watson Analytics is no longer for sale. We still have it available to us in the academic world. Watson Analytics, you are correct in your assumption. It will be subsumed into the new IBM Cognos product, which is part of Watson Studio. One of the most confusing things about IBM is their naming convention for their programs. So Watson Analytics will not in this course, so you're safe for this whole semester, but by summer, the plan from IBM is as we understand it, is to roll Watson Analytics, they've already done it actually, most of it, into Cognos, which has been one of their products for several years, similar, and then Cognos will be a subset of Watson Studio, which we'll have access to. So you're not learning something that you're not going to be able to use. You mentioned the focus is on decision. Why not using data to help leadership develop pertinent questions based on the available data? Certainly, I think, Joe, that's an aspect. One of the reasons we use data is to gain insights, and some of those insights are additional questions. I'm not against that at all. Now, we realize we don't have the time in the program to have a full-blown course on decision making. I wish we did, because I've taught entire courses on decision making in my quantitative world, because I worked at the National Defense University when I was in the Air Force for 20 years, and I taught generals and senior military how to make better decisions, and that was not easy to convince them to use data. So I fully understand the aspects. Of course, a long time ago, it was difficult to do. Now it's getting easier. So yeah, I mean, developing questions based on what insights you glean from the data is certainly part and parcel of what could go into some of your project reports as you flesh them out. When should we expect the passwords and setups for decisions first in Watson Analytics? I think soon. If your faculty, professors have those, they should be able to provide them soon. They will enroll you in Watson Analytics. In Decisions First, and give you the password. I think some of the sections are already working on that. I know they all should be. You will have that. Certainly, you need to have that within the next several days, because by Friday, I'll be doing the walkthrough. So if you don't hear from your faculty about that, that's a good question to post in the discussion area in the classroom. Keep them on their toes. Good questions. We always like to have inquisitive students. We want students who aren't here just to get through the program. My feeling now, after 5 years of this, is one of the key lessons learned is you can click on a lot of stuff and get through the program, but you better be able to go out there in the real world and explain what's behind the scenes. As I mentioned earlier, I'm old enough to have done these things by hand. So hours and hours and hours building a logistic regression equation wasn't fun. And in those days, you focused a lot on building one model because that's all you had time for. Now I say it's the exact opposite. Build dozens, if not tens of dozens of models, varying parameters, varying techniques, varying tools, varying data sets, varying pieces of data sets, sort them all out and be able to articulate that well to your decision makers. If you can do that, you're going to be invaluable. You still have to understand what's behind the scenes. You can't say, well, there's a black box there that does something. Nope, that's not going to work. So we'll help you with that. How many students are in our current cohort, as in how many are starting the MSDA program this term? Second, out of curiosity, based on your knowledge of the software we're learning, what's the expected level of proficiency we should have by the end of our program? Okay. We have 3 sections of Data 610 beginning this term. with a maximum of 22 or so in each one, I believe. So I don't know if they're all completely full, but they're close. So we're probably starting, as we usually do, about 60 students or more. That's been kind of the norm. We've grown quite a bit over the years, and of course, a lot of other schools offer analytics programs. We think ours is unique, focusing on decision making and analytics. We think ours is by far the most cost effective, and it's worked out great so far in terms of people succeeding and getting good jobs and promotions. Okay, on to your second question. What is the expected level of proficiency we should have by the end of the program? Well, you'll be learning a lot of different programs, software programs. And source learning the clicks and how to work them is one thing. Proficiency, I consider proficiency being able to articulate what was done behind the scenes, as well as being able to click on the right icons. Now, the level of proficiency we expect you to have is certainly familiarity to where when you go out in the real world and somebody says, we're going to use something called Watson Analytics on this. Anybody ever heard of that? We would certainly expect you to raise your hand and say, not only have I heard of it, I've used it. Let me show you some of the projects I did with it. Same thing for SAS, same thing for Python, same thing for Watson Cognos and so forth as we move into that. So you'll have an awareness and a mastery to a certain level. Now, quite honestly, some students will spend more time and gain greater mastery than others. But certainly we expect everybody to gain a level of mastery where they will know what goes on in those programs. They'll be able to use those programs. They will have done projects with those programs. And they certainly won't feel nervous about, oh, well, there's a few options I didn't try, but I certainly know how to get to those. So I don't know where that is on a scale of 1 to 10, but certainly it's not a 1, it's not a 10, but it might be, 7, 8, somewhere in there. We expect you to be pretty good with these programs. And again, a lot of that depends on how much extra time you want to put in. I teach the Data 640 course, which is Advanced Predictive Modeling. Some students for an assignment might build 4 or 5 models. Some students might build 40 models. I think the ones that built 40 have a lot more mastery, especially if they can explain the differences and the subtleties and what parameters were optimized and why, than the students who built 2 or 3. Do you know if UMUC is considering offering a data science program? Would the time frame be the same as data analytics? I do not know. I doubt if we are, because when we first built this program, and again, I was part of the team that built it, we decided to make it a data analytics program versus a data science program. And I'm not even sure I can delineate in great detail the difference. Certainly data science and data analytics are 2 terms that are bandied about and mean a wide variety of things. There's a lot of data science in our data analytics program. When you're building models, when you're doing big data, when you're writing Python code, as you will much further downstream and all, you're doing a lot of data science. You're doing machine learning. The real focus is on machine learning now. That really is the term that you see bandied about more than anything. Deep learning, machine learning, things like that, where you're able to take data, past data, turn it over to a software program and have some insights and some predictions come out of that that are meaningful. And of course, by meaningful, I mean probabilistically meaningful. You're not going to get anything that's perfect, but the key is always, and again, this is part of the decision-making aspect, having worked for a lot of bosses who would constantly say, is your model, I was building different kinds of models, decision support systems, et cetera, is your model perfect? My answer was always no. And they would say, why should I use it? And I would say, because it's better than what you're doing now. So if you build a model, like I mentioned, the Zillow model improved the range of error, reduced it from 4.5% to 4%. And I was listening to the NPR discussion about that with the winners, and one of the NPR moderators said, well, that doesn't sound like very much. Well, first of all, it's a 13% improvement in the error margin. And secondly, it turns out to be worth tens of millions of dollars when you're talking about classifying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of homes across the country. Being able to reduce that error margin from 4.5% on the estimate to 4% is very valuable. being able to identify people who are likely to churn or leave your company or likely to commit fraud or likely not to pay loans back is very valuable. So the question you've got to continually come back to is it better than what you're doing now? And I think we make a strong case in the first week or two of Data 610 to the limitations of intuition, hunch, and experience. And if that's what your organization is using, they are going to be um, they're going to be overwhelmed by the people who are using data, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most. Sorry for getting off on a tangent. Okay, any other questions? I'm in the lecturing mode now rather than explaining the course, but I don't mind doing that. You probably have figured that out by now that I enjoy what I do in this program immensely. This is a lot of fun. You've mentioned Python a few times now, but when I took the USCP course, it steered the data analytics to R. You'll be using R and you'll be using Python both. You will have some options, especially when you get to the capstone course, as to whether you'd like to use R or Python or SAS or Decisions First or Watson Analytics. I have students in the capstone course using combinations of software or using whichever one they feel comfortable with or whichever one does the task best. But you will become acquainted with R and Python both. And we'll guide you gently through learning those software programs, not to worry. If you've been through the UCSP courses, you're fine, you're in good shape. Good question. See, the first course has no programming. So Decisions First and Watson Analytics, you do not write any code. And so we start you out very gently. And then when we get to the code writing, we provide you lots of help and lots of examples and so forth. So not to worry about that. Again, we've 5 years in, we've sort of figured out how to do this right that works well. Now, that doesn't mean the program hasn't changed. Let me quickly point out that we revise every course to a degree every semester. New readings, new videos, in some cases, new software. As was mentioned, we might have to switch to, by summer, we may have to switch to Cognos and so forth. So there's new software added all the time to the program. We want you to graduate from our program well-versed in the software that's used in the real world, okay? And that's why we focus on the programs we do. We also want you to be acquainted with a variety of programs because we can't guarantee which company you'll go to will be using which software. All right, I don't see other questions showing up, so I'm going to go ahead and I think stop the recording. Remember, the link will be available if anyone wants to look at it. I appreciate your time. I know it was not required because we recorded it. I am delighted to have people attend live because that's where the good questions come from, because whatever I've not been clear on, people will quickly ask questions about. That's great. Again, let's get up and running. If you keep the momentum for the first course and are successful, which I'm sure you will be, then you'll be off to a great start in the MSDA program. And I will certainly see many, if not all of you again, somewhere in one of the courses downstream. Thanks. I'm going to stop the recording.